Ladies and gentlemen, we have a very bullish technical pattern that has recently been established for Palantir Technologies, and this is bullish in terms of the short-term perspective. This is especially important because we have those earnings that are going to be reported November 2nd pre-market. And this means that a lot of eyeballs are looking at Palantir, which increases volatility, which can bring large price swings in the short term. We're going to be looking at this bullish technical pattern, but also talking about Palantir in the long term. What about Palantir 2024? One of the biggest criticisms for the stock is its high valuation. Can this be justified to trade it at this premium price, or are we going to see a correction after earnings does get reported? Only time's going to tell, but let's do some analysis and get into this stock. Now, if you're new or a returning viewer, thank you guys so much for watching. Hit that like button, and if you want to get up to 12 free stocks on Webull, just depositing any amount, you could deposit $5. Check out the affiliate link down in the description. And of course, I'm not a financial advisor. Take everything I say with a grain of salt, and let's get into the video. Now, looking at Palantir, let's quickly analyze what we have talked about is this consolidation that we're seeing on the 1 hour chart and comparing it to last quarter earnings. And we're seeing history repeat itself exactly. And we're seeing this support level being formed here at the 16s. Before earnings were released for quarter two, this is last quarter earnings, we had this buying pressure facing resistance here at this $18 zone. If we quickly just draw a horizontal trend line right here, we faced that same resistance last week. We saw that correction, especially with last Friday's trading session when Palantir corrected about 5%, came down here to the 16s. We consolidated here, and right before earnings, quarter two earnings were released, we had resistance at the 2024. Now, this is a strong resistance point because it's the 52-week high for PLTR. But where we're consolidating right now at the 16s, something does look slightly different. And if we zoom in and considerably zoom in right here, and if we take a look at that 16 support level right here, you have this bottom out, and this is a bullish hammer being formed, and this is incredibly bullish for the short-term perspective. Reason being is because you have Palantir that basically opens up at this bottom right here as the bearish basically sellers are trying to take control, but it bottoms out right here, and immediate buyback returns it basically to the opening price at the 16s, which means the bulls are starting to take control. Now, talking about this pattern, we even have different articles that have identified this, even Zacks.com. And what's great about Zacks.com, they're pretty strict with their analysis. They have recently rated Palantir and changed its rating to a number 2 rating for the Zacks rank, which is a buy, when currently before it was a number 3, which is a hold. Now, talking about this hammer chart and this technique and the way that it can be traded is that during a downtrend, like we said, when the bears have absolute control, when we saw this decrease in this correction with Palantir, you do see it opening lower compared to the previous day, and that hammer pattern is formed, maintaining that downtrend. But finding support of the low of that 15, you see it returning back to its opening price. And what I say right here is basically on this 5-minute chart, you're seeing this being utilized as a technical indicator that particularly this could be a trend reversal for PLTR. And as we talk about that, in addition, with its pre-market November 2nd quarter earnings being released, you had 5 bullish earnings per share revisions that are increasing and being set to a higher standard. So Palantir has a great outlook in the short-term perspective. And it's important to remember that in the short-term perspective right here, and considering this bullish indicator that has been formed on the fundamental side, looking into Palantir, one thing is to consider, what about Palantir 2024? And before we get too far in this video, what we've talked about with Palantir and what I've said personally, what I think could possibly happen is this continuation of the $16 support level being tested. I think we might test the 1844 resistance before earnings. I don't know if we'll get to that $20 resistance. We could, depending if any media outlook or bullish news comes in, or if the bulls continue to take advantage of this hammer being formed, we could test this 2024. But I think after earnings gets released, and that's why if you're not into PLTR right now, if you're looking at the sidelines, this is incredibly important because there's a lot of volatility that can be ahead. And it's important to consider that this stock is already up 155% in 2023. And that's why it's important to talk about after earnings. I think we're going to see a short-term bullish run, what we're kind of experiencing right now. But after that, could we see a corrections with Palantir? And talking about a long-term growth potential, possibly getting in at better prices. And the reason that we do say that is because Wall Street's opinion is really a mixed bag. I agree here with barchart.com saying that there are many analysts that are rating this in many different ways. And currently, many analysts do, with high price targets up to 25 and low price targets down to the $5 price. With that being said, you have many analysts that are rating this as a hold, and they are keeping it as a hold, with just a few as a strong buy. And the consensus on PLTR is a revenue growth that's kind of slightly decreasing. We're seeing right now for Q3 expected a 16.4% year-over-year increase, of course, with that earnings per share, like we've talked about, at about 6 cents. Now, if we go into this, why people and why analysts are thinking that Palantir might have already been pricing in some of these big contracts that are being released is because some analysts are thinking that the 2024 revenue estimate of 2.6 billion already factors in some of these large contracts that we've seen, like the Department of Defense contract that's worth 250 million. And then of course you have that 7-year United Kingdom National Health Service contract that's worth about 480 million. That's not officially confirmed yet, but what analysts are believing is that Palantir has already factored this into their 2024 revenue metrics. And if this is true, then a lot of these bullish outlooks and potentials are being priced in as we speak. But what's important for Palantir, and I think why we will continue possibly after a correction to see a long-term growth metric, is the AIP platform. And looking at Palantir, their AIP bootcamp. What this is great, and especially for Palantir, it has many different softwares that it is selling. Their AIP, the Foundry, Gotham, Apollo. What the AIP bootcamp does is basically saying, hey, we will find a use case for your clients in going from 0 to in 5 days, and they can try it for free. This helps diversify and bring more customer growth to Palantir, which is really important because customers are what do drive the business from the beginning. So where will Palantir and what could the future hold for Palantir, I think is really going to come from this AIP platform. And this allows users and Palantir to help prove to various clients the various amounts of different softwares or the specific software that Palantir is selling, how it can be incorporated into their business and increase effectiveness, and why it should be incorporated into these clientele's business. And with that being said, as they test many different softwares of Palantir, it could be more than one. Not just using the Foundry, not using just Apollo, not just using Gotham, but possibly there could be many different they could have an inclusion of more softwares rather than just that one. Another big thing for long-term growth and why Palantir is looking great in terms of possibly after we do see a correction here, possibly after earnings, is the actual AI revolution. And what a lot of analysts have predicted, the amount of valuation that's going to come into the AI industry. And as Palantir does compete with some of the top competitors, that will hurt its valuation, especially with Google, Microsoft. But if Palantir can stay competitive in talking about that, and of course we're not even mentioning its inclusion in the S&P 500 yet, then you do have a great long-term growth stock that is increasingly maturing as we speak. And that is great in terms of the long-term bullish run. But if you're not in Palantir now, like I said, we could see lots of valuation changes. And I think that's why a lot of analysts are rating Palantir right now as a hold. It makes sense. Just sit on the sidelines and see where Palantir goes here, because if you put all your eggs in one basket right before earnings, and if they were to miss it, you could see a large decrease in terms of its valuation, getting more to realistic prices possibly. And right now with the forward price to earnings multiple of 61, it's more and substantially more expensive than the S&P 500 average of 24. And possibly with the inclusion, if it does have another gap profitability for the 4th quarter in a row, then you can have the criteria and it fits the curriculum to get into the S&P 500, which does help mature the company, as many different funds do track the S&P 500 index, which can create a lot of buying pressure and, like I said, more maturity for the stock. So that's really all that I have for you guys, talking about Palantir in the short term, talking about it in the long term. Like I said, things can change in any way. So take everything I say with a grain of salt, and please do your own research, especially with more of a speculative type tech stock. So if you have any questions, if you want to talk more, let's start a discussion. Leave it down in the description. I'll catch you guys later, and peace out. Take care, and we'll see what happens with Palantir tomorrow.